Some people spend half their lives explaining themselves and still feel misunderstood. Others say very little, and somehow the room learns how to treat them. That difference is not luck, it is not charm, and it is certainly not noise. It is a form of inner strength most people only recognize after they have suffered enough to need it. Because there comes a point in life when you begin to see something uncomfortable. The more desperately you explain who you are, what you meant, why you did it, why you stayed, why you left, why you are trying, the cheaper your peace begins to feel. And the strongest people understand this earlier than most. They learn that not everything true needs to be defended out loud. Now, this does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean becoming secretive for the sake of looking mysterious. That sort of performance fools no one for long. I mean something quieter than that, something older, the kind of strength that lets a person stand in their own life without begging to be translated. And if you watch carefully, mentally strong people almost never explain 5 particular things. The first is their every decision. Weakness often talks too much after it acts. Strength usually moves, then lets time speak. A mentally strong person understands that once a decision is made with care, not every bystander deserves a full courtroom presentation. Think of the man who finally leaves a job that has been draining him for years. Everyone around him suddenly becomes a strategist. Why would you leave now? What if it was a mistake? You should have waited. You should have stayed. It is always fascinating how quickly spectators become experts when the risk belongs to someone else. A mentally strong person listens if wisdom is offered in good faith, but they do not turn their life into a public debate. They know something many people learn too late. Endless explanation is often a hidden request for permission, and permission is a dangerous thing to build your life around. If you need universal approval before you act, you will remain parked at the edge of your own future, engine running, going nowhere. The truth is simple. Some decisions make sense only from the inside. Only the person carrying the weight knows how heavy it has become. That is the part most people miss. Outsiders judge decisions by appearance. The person living it judges by cost. Cost of peace, cost of sleep, cost of dignity, cost of waking each morning with that dull feeling in the chest that says, if I stay here much longer, I will become someone smaller. Mentally strong people do not explain every move because they are no longer trying to make everyone comfortable with the life they themselves must live. And that takes nerve. The second thing they never explain too much is their boundaries. This one upsets people. It always has. A person can be exhausted, overextended, quietly resentful for years, and society will call them kind. The moment they begin saying no with a steady voice, suddenly they are difficult, selfish, changed. Changed. Yes, usually for the better. A boundary is not a speech. It is not a dramatic announcement delivered with thunder and violin music in the background. Most healthy boundaries are almost boring. I can't do that. I'm leaving now. That doesn't work for me. Please don't speak to me that way. Quiet sentences, clean edges. Yet people who have benefited from your lack of boundaries will often demand an essay. Why? Because if they can pull you into a long explanation, they can often pull you back into guilt. And guilt has persuaded more people to betray themselves than malice ever did. Mentally strong people learn to notice this pattern. The request is rarely for understanding alone. Often, though not always, it is a request for access. Access to your time, your energy, your attention, your emotional labor, your patience, your last clean nerve at the end of the day. And once you see that, you stop decorating your no. There is a quiet dignity in a person who no longer feels obliged to write a 1,000-word apology for protecting their peace. not because they enjoy disappointing others, quite the opposite. Strong people often hate letting others down, but they hate abandoning themselves even more. Picture a woman who has spent years being the reliable one, the extra shift, the late-night call, the family mediator, the friend who always understands. One day she says calmly, "I'm not available tonight." No anger, no drama, just fact. And then comes the familiar pressure. "Are you upset? Is everything okay? Come on, it's just this once." Except it is never just this once, is it? So she repeats herself, not louder, just clearer. That is strength. The third thing mentally strong people rarely explain is their healing. This may be the most misunderstood of all. People are very comfortable with visible struggle. They understand the obvious breakdown, the public heartbreak, the messy season everyone can point at. What unsettles them is quiet recovery. When someone begins changing in silence, the world often does not know what to do with them. A man who used to answer every message immediately begins taking his time. A woman who once tolerated disrespect now walks away earlier. Someone who used to overshare becomes more private. Someone who once chased, argued, proved, and pleaded simply stops. And because people did not witness the long nights, the private grief, the repeated disappointments, the hours of reflection, they assume the change came from nowhere. It did not. Mental strength is often built in rooms no one claps for.
In the parked car before going upstairs. In the bathroom at work where someone stares at their own face and thinks, "I cannot keep living like this." In the morning walk nobody knows about. In the decision not to send the message. In the therapy session. In the journal page torn out and thrown away. In the small daily refusal to keep reopening a wound just because it feels familiar. Healing does not always look noble while it is happening. Sometimes it looks inconvenient. Sometimes it looks antisocial. Sometimes it looks like a person becoming less available to chaos. And that can offend people who still expect the old version of you. But mentally strong people understand that healing explained too early is healing exposed to unnecessary opinions. Not everyone deserves front-row seats to your reconstruction. Some processes need privacy, the way seeds need soil.
Mention your growth too soon, and some people will question it, mock it, tempt it, or ask you to shrink so they can remain comfortable. That is not because your healing is wrong. It is because change rearranges relationships. It reveals who loved your spirit and who merely preferred your softness, your usefulness, your old willingness to bend. So strong people protect their progress while it is still becoming real, not out of arrogance, out of wisdom. The fourth thing they do not over-explain is their silence. Now, this is an interesting one because silence makes insecure people tell stories. If you answer less, they think you are angry. If you pull back, they think you are proud. If you observe instead of reacting, they think you are plotting something. Human beings are deeply uncomfortable with empty space. We rush to fill it with assumptions. Mentally strong people know this. More importantly, they stop trying to control every assumption made about them. That is freedom. There is a stage in emotional maturity when you realize that not every misunderstanding is your emergency. Let me say that again because it saves people years of exhaustion. Not every misunderstanding is your emergency. Some people misread you because they are reading from an old script. Some cannot imagine peace unless it comes with constant proof. Some are so used to dramatic people that a calm person feels suspicious. You cannot spend your life correcting every false interpretation. You will die tired. Sometimes silence is not avoidance. It is discernment. It is knowing the conversation will not produce clarity, only more heat. It is recognizing that an argument with a committed misreader is just another way of donating your energy to nonsense.
It is sensing, with that quiet animal wisdom we all possess and too often ignore, that words are being invited not to understand you, but to use against you later. So the strong person pauses, and this pause has power, though not the theatrical sort. It creates space between feeling and action, between insult and response, between pressure and surrender. That little space is where self-respect lives. Most regrettable things in life happen in the absence of that space. An angry message sent too fast, a secret revealed to the wrong ear, a desperate explanation offered to someone who had already decided not to understand. Silence, used wisely, interrupts that chain. It prevents temporary emotion from becoming permanent consequence. Of course, silence can be abused. Cowardice can wear the same coat. But mentally strong people know the difference. They are not silent because they are afraid to speak. They are silent because they know speech is valuable, and they are no longer throwing gold into the street. And the fifth thing, perhaps the deepest of all, is this. Mentally strong people do not endlessly explain their worth. They do not stand in front of people with a basket of evidence, saying, "Please see that I matter." Most people begin life this way. It is almost innocent. We want to be chosen, approved of, understood. So we perform. We overgive, we overprove, we overclarify. We become so busy trying to be undeniable that we barely notice who keeps treating us as optional. That habit can follow a person for decades. A son still trying to earn the softness he never got. A woman still trying to become easy to love. A man building success not because he enjoys the work, but because somewhere inside he still hopes achievement will finally make him feel sufficient. It is painful to admit, but much of adult exhaustion comes from childhood negotiations we never realized we were still carrying. And mentally strong people, after enough heartbreak and enough reflection, begin putting that burden down. They understand that worth explained is often worth doubted. Read that slowly. If you know who you are, deeply know it, not as a slogan but as a settled fact, then every room does not get a presentation. Every relationship does not get a campaign. Every cold face does not get a performance designed to win it over. This changes the way a person walks through life. They stop trying so hard to make everyone feel their value. They begin paying attention to who can recognize value without being begged. That one shift can save years. Because there are people in this world who will gladly accept your loyalty, your labor, your tenderness, your patience, your ideas, even your silence, and still behave as if your presence were ordinary. No speech will fix that. No perfect wording will cure deliberate blindness. Mentally strong people know when explanation has crossed the line and become self-abandonment. And here, at the center of all five things, is the real lesson. Mental strength is not loud confidence. It is not a sharp jawline, a cold stare, and dramatic music in the background as some man walks away from an explosion of his own unresolved emotions. Life is rarely that cinematic. Real strength is far less glamorous and much more useful. It is the ability to tolerate being misunderstood without collapsing into self-betrayal. That is what joins all of these together. Decisions, boundaries, healing, silence, worth. In every case, the temptation is the same. Explain more, prove more, clarify more, defend more. Surely, if I just say it the right way, everyone will understand and I will finally feel at ease. But peace built on universal understanding is fragile peace. Someone will always disagree. Someone will always project. Someone will always take your boundary personally, your silence negatively, your growth as rejection, your self-respect as arrogance. This is not a sign you are doing life wrong. Quite often, it is the price of finally doing it honestly. Psychologists have long observed that human beings want coherence.
We want other people to stay understandable, predictable, familiar. When you change, especially in healthy ways, you interrupt that comfort. People who knew your old patterns may prefer the version of you they had already learned how to handle. That does not mean you should become cruel. It means you should become clear. Clear with yourself first. Ask yourself a hard question. How much of your exhaustion comes from living your life, and how much comes from explaining your life? Those are not the same burden. One is natural, the other is often optional. There is a certain sadness in realizing how many years can be spent in explanation, explaining why you are tired, why you cannot keep giving, why that hurt you, why you need distance, why you chose differently, why you have changed, why you are no longer available for the old arrangement. And then one day, if you are fortunate, something inside you grows quiet, not empty, quiet. You realize you have been standing on a stage nobody asked you to stand on, delivering speeches to an audience that had already bought its own version of you. You step down. You go home. You sit in your own company for a while. Strange thing happens then. The air changes. The nervous system softens. Your mind becomes less crowded. You sleep better. Because self-respect is restful. That is one of its loveliest qualities. It removes noise. You no longer chase every misunderstanding down the street. You no longer throw your private logic before a jury of casual opinions. You do not become hard. You become anchored. And anchored people move differently. Slower sometimes, cleaner, with less panic in their voice. If someone worthy asks with sincerity, you may explain. Of course. Depth belongs in places that can hold it. Love deserves honesty. Good friendships deserve context. Mature relationships are built on communication, not mind reading. But that is not the same as compulsive explaining. One comes from connection. The other comes from fear. And fear is expensive. So perhaps the better question is not, how do I make people understand me? Perhaps it is this. Where am I still explaining myself to avoid the discomfort of simply standing by my own truth? That is where your next layer of strength is waiting. Not in becoming colder, not in becoming superior, not in turning your heart to stone and calling it wisdom. No. Real mental strength keeps the heart warm and the spine firm. It lets you remain kind without becoming available for misuse. It lets you remain thoughtful without becoming easy to override. A gentleman learns that. A lady learns that. Eventually, anyone who has suffered enough and reflected honestly begins to learn it. The strongest people you know are not always the ones making the grandest speeches. Often they are the ones who have quietly stopped auditioning for understanding from people who never intended to give it. And there is something beautiful about that. A person like this becomes easier to trust. Their words carry more weight because they are not scattered everywhere. Their yes means more because it is no longer automatic. Their no feels cleaner because it is not coated in resentment. Their presence settles a room because they are no longer at war with themselves. That kind of strength cannot be faked for long. It is earned, usually painfully, usually privately, usually after a season where life strips a person of the illusion that endless explanation can save them from difficult truths. It cannot. But clarity can help. Boundaries can help. Silence can help. Self-respect can help. And perhaps tonight, or this morning, or wherever in the world you happen to be listening from, that is the thought worth keeping. You do not need to explain every decision to live it well. You do not need to defend every boundary to have one. You do not need to narrate your healing to make it real. You do not need to answer every misunderstanding to stay honest. And you do not need to convince the wrong people of your worth for your worth to remain intact. Some truths become stronger when spoken less. Tell me honestly, which of these 5 do you still find yourself over-explaining?